Hello, friends. I'm Chris. I'm from Transformation Nation Yoga and Wellness. And welcome to YINVINCIBLE. This is our 2-hour Yin Yoga for Anxiety workshop. What I think you'll need to be safe, to enjoy, and to get the most out of your practice. Uh, there'll be a 30 to 45-minute discussion period. For that, it would be nice to have a comfortable seated position. Now, this might be the very same as you use as your practice space, which I'll describe in a few moments, or it might be very different. It could be a desk, it could be a table and chair. I also think for that, it might be useful to have something to write on, a notebook or a journal, and a pen or a pencil. Now, it's not necessary to keep notes during this workshop unless you're moved to do so, but I am going to prompt you to do a little bit of self-reflecting on what exactly anxiety looks like and means to you and what you're hoping to get out of this workshop. You're also going to need the practice space. Now, for this practice space, what I recommend are a yoga mat, at least one blanket, a yoga bolster, and 2 yoga blocks. So pause your recording, gather up everything that you're going to need for the discussion portion of the workshop, and then when you're ready, press play, and I'll meet you in your comfortable seated position for the first part of our YINVINCIBLE workshop. All right, friends, we're going to get going with that. Good job taking the time out to really figure out what you want to get out of this. I will tell you that for me, I have a lifetime of experience with managing anxiety. So, along the way, through my yoga practice, through therapy, through lots of different life experiences, I figured out some tools that help me to cope with and manage my anxiety. And so, what part of what I'm hoping to get out of this experience is share these tools with you in a way that maybe some of them will be helpful and part of the solution for you. And the hardest thing about anxiety for me, I think it's two things that come to mind. And one is like when it's on, it is relentless, right? I'm better now at stopping the cycle and catching a problem where it's small before it gets bigger. But when it really gets intense, anxiety can be really tough. The other thing that's difficult is anxiety for me often manifests in a positive feedback loop, right? So that the symptoms of the anxiety set the tracks for more causes and conditions for more anxiety. So one example of this is one of the things that I notice when my anxiety level starts to get high is that my sleep disappears. It's really difficult for me to rest. Now I have a better understanding of nervous system function now and why that happens, and I have some tools that I can use to help manage my own nervous system. Um, but nonetheless, in the moment, it can be really really difficult. And when I'm not sleeping well, it's harder and harder for me to manage my anxiety. So less sleep, like anxiety equals less sleep equals more anxiety, and it can just cycle like that. So for me, those are the two most difficult, challenging things about anxiety. So what should you be able to expect out of this experience? We're going to do a brief discussion to distinguish like my 2 cents on anxiety versus depression, right? Sometimes we use these terms as synonymous, and to me, they're very different things. But we're also going to distinguish yin yoga from other yoga practices. I'll provide an overview of traditional Chinese medicine, which from this point forward in this workshop, we'll refer to as TCM. I'll describe the TCM energetic system through the lens of the Chinese meridians. We'll discuss the qualities of heart, stomach, and spleen meridians. And then we'll do a practice. We'll do some meridian tapping of those 3 meridians plus small intestine. And we'll do a 75-minute yin practice. During the yin practice, I'll deliver a Dharma talk on anxiety. And then we'll close with a description of Next Level Human, which within Transformation Nation Yoga and Wellness is our 12-month Ayurvedic health coaching program. Let's begin with a discussion on distinguishing anxiety versus depression. So the primary criterion based on which I thought about this were orientation to time, the nature of the thoughts or the feelings, and the energetic level. So with anxiety, anxiety is really future oriented. Like the here and now is not a concern when we're in an anxious state. And sometimes the thoughts of worry or the concern that things will go wrong is based around something really specific. Sometimes it's really non-specific as well. And if you think about the type of mental energy that you had during a time of anxiety, this tends to be a very, very high level of energy. Now, the thrust of this workshop today is through the lens of Taoism and traditional Chinese medicine. But I thought it bore mentioning that from the Vedic standpoint, if you look from the doshas of Ayurveda, anxiety is a vata imbalance. So vata is the dosha that is air and energy, and it tends to be pretty fluttery, pretty high energy. Right. So, other interesting thing to note is we can be, our dosha of birth can be anything, and we could still be imbalanced in a different dosha. So, for example, I am pitta, I am very much fire and water, but my imbalances tend to be in the direction of vata, of air and ether. So, things like arthritis, creaky joints, and anxiety are all examples of vata imbalances that we can have. So that's anxiety. Now, in contrast, depression tends to be oriented in the past. Uh, it tends to focus around feelings of great sadness, and it's low energy. So again, from a Vedic standpoint, depression is a kapha imbalance. So kapha is the earth and water element dosha. So that kind of heaviness, that earthiness, it's like an overgrounding. Is depression. Now, this makes it sound like we either have anxiety or like if we um, are suffering in one of these ways. We have anxiety or we have depression. As you probably know, it's very possible to have both. But I think if you'll note, if you've been gone through seasons of your life where you experience both anxiety and depression, the energetic levels were really different in the times where you were experiencing the specifics with either of those two things. So, what do these two things have in common, anxiety and depression? The time orientation is at other than the present moment. So, part of the solution when we find ourselves in the throes, especially if we can catch this when it's small, is to try to fix ourselves into the here and now. All right. So, with that, let's talk about yin yoga. Right. So most of us that practice yoga at least started with a practice that was rooted in the Vedic sciences. So they originated in teachings that came from India. Now, the yoga that we practice in, say, North America today in 2021 is, as I understand it, very, very different than what the ancient yoga practitioners in India were practicing 5,000 years ago. But that vinyasa style of yoga or that hatha style of yoga is very much rooted in that Vedic background from India. In contrast, yin yoga is a Taoist practice. It comes from China. Whereas with, say, vinyasa yoga, we're moving really quickly through these dynamic shapes. Yin yoga is characterized by long, deep holds, but done at the threshold of discomfort and pain. So I'll talk about this again during the practice, but what I ask practitioners to look for, I want you to feel something during the practice, right? And I don't like we're trying to offset dysfunctional movement patterns and promote the flow of energy through the body. And I'll talk about the specific medium through that flow later on during our discussion. But the bottom line is, if we're going to try to correct what is often, a lifetime of dysfunctional movement patterns, and we're trying to make those small corrections an hour at a time, it's not going to be comfortable. It also should not be painful. So if you think about a threshold of pain on a numerical scale where 0 you felt nothing, and a 10 would be excruciating, you couldn't bear it, you'd be compelled to move. I'd like you to start each shape at a level of sensation that's at least a 4, but not more than a 6. One of the other characteristics of yin yoga is once we get the target level of sensation, in the target area of the body, the practice is to approach stillness and allow time and gravity to affect changes in the connective tissues by drawing everything down toward the earth. So that's a very brief overview of yin yoga. Now, as a Taoist practice, really yin yoga, from my perspective, is rooted in the teaching of traditional Chinese medicine, or as I mentioned, TCM. Now, this is a 2,500 year old medical system. It uses multiple modalities. So probably what TCM is best known for, when people think about TCM, if they thought of nothing else, they would think about acupuncture, or they might think about herbal medicine, the use of Chinese herbs, but also massage is an aspect of TCM. A really specific diet is an aspect of TCM. Exercise, if you're familiar with Qigong, very much a TCM rooted exercise. And the other thing that distinguishes with these ancient medical systems, there's so many things in common. In contrast with like Ayurveda, which is the I would consider to be the Vedic equivalent, the traditional Chinese medicine puts a lot of emphasis on these energetic channels in the body called meridians. Now, in Ayurveda, it's important to note this same philosophy, this same teaching is there. They're called the nadis in the Vedic sciences. But in contrast, traditional Chinese medicine puts a relative more emphasis on the meridians than, say, Ayurveda puts on the nadis. So these TCM meridians are energetic channels, and it's thought that as we have a circulatory system that promotes the flow of blood through our body, and we have a nervous system that has these electrical impulses used to communicate from through different parts of our body, that there's an energetic little electrical impulses that move through these energetic channels. And within traditional Chinese medicine, there are 12 regular meridians. Now, these meridians are associated with really specific organs, right? And they're paired. So the five elements are represented with at least two meridians. One meridian will represent the yang, hard, hot, masculine aspect of that element, and the other will be the feminine, soft, cool aspect, the yin aspect of that element. Now, if you do the math, we have 12 regular meridians and we have five elements. And if I told you they're paired, the math isn't lining up, right? So fire element specifically has a total of four organs, four meridians that are associated with that. With the organs, this might be interesting for you, but as I mentioned, the meridians, they're named after and associated with specific organs. The solid dense organs are usually the yin meridian, whereas the hollow organs whose job is to hold something else, those are usually the yang meridians. So as I mentioned, the meridians are pathways through which energy flows through the body. And it's thought by many teachers that the physical mechanism through which the meridians run is the fascia. And I'll talk more about fascia or fascia in a moment. If we were going to take just a cursory peek behind the curtains of the meridians of traditional Chinese medicine, I would share with you that each of the meridians relates to a physiological function, uh, a musculoskeletal function, and an emotional state. Each has a number of different qualities associated with the elements and with the meridians. And I've cherry picked a few here to include an associated season, color, and taste. When it comes to balance within the individual meridians and indeed within the elements, these are broken down into prenatal virtues versus acquired emotion. So the way that I understand this right now, prenatal virtues are the way when we're in balance, that they're how we are emotionally within the areas that each individual meridian governs. Right, so if you look at the prenatal virtues for each of the meridians, they're really aspirational type qualities. So we would typically think of these as the sorts of qualities that we would want to be working toward. So we come into the world fairly balanced, but right away, as soon as we start to enter the world, we begin to get traumatized. We get traumatized in small ways and we get traumatized in big ways. We're traumatized physically, we're traumatized emotionally, we're traumatized spiritually. And based on those traumas, we start to change our behaviors. That throws things out of balance. And then we shift from the prenatal virtues of balance into the acquired emotion as indicators of imbalance. So when you look at the acquired emotions for each of the individual meridians, I think what you'll find is they look like, from my perspective, difficult emotions, the sort of emotions that we would struggle with and try to get ourselves out of. I also want to talk a little bit about connective tissue. So, as I mentioned, as a yin yoga practitioner, our allies are time and gravity. So, we get the target amount of sensation, discomfort, but not quite pain. In the target area of the body, we approach stillness, and then time and gravity draw the connective tissues down toward Earth. That's how it works. So, one thing to note, connective tissue includes fascia, joints, ligaments, tendons. Sometimes you'll hear teachers talk about wanting to stretch connective tissues, and I would be cautious with um, with phrasing it that way. We do want to stretch the fascia. We want to restore more of a normal um, condition of those tissues. We don't want to stretch joints, ligaments, and tendons. Now, these other connective tissues, joints, ligaments, and tendons, they respond very, very well to constructive stress, right? So we do want to apply some stress on them. We do not want to stretch them. Once we stretch them, it's one-way traffic. They're not going to bounce back in the other way. So, as an example, I've stretched some ligaments in the top of one of my feet, and that foot will never be normal again. So, my task now is to strengthen the stabilizing muscles around that ligament. But like, we want to be really careful. So, usually, if you hear a yoga teacher talking about wanting to stress joints, ligaments, and tendons, what they mean is stress. But if they don't mean stress and they do mean stretch, I'm going to be honest with you, I would not practice with that teacher. Now, relative to lots of other anatomical science, fascia is a fairly recent discovery. So a lot of an early anatomy study was done where fascia was seen as an obstacle, something to clear and get out of the way. Um, but that's not a very holistic view of the nature of the human body. So fascia is this thin layer of connective tissue, and we have a superficial layer that we have from the crown of the head all the way down to the soles of our feet. Now this might be coarse, and if you're vegetarian or vegan, forgive me if this is triggering, but if you've opened up a package of chicken and you've seen that thin whitish sheen of tissue that's on the surface of the meat that someone is about to eat, that's the fascia. We have that too. We also have deeper lines or in deeper layers of fascia, but much of our emphasis is going to be on that superficial layer. Now, what's interesting about fascia is it has aspects of both plasticity and elasticity. And it takes on the shape that our bodies habitually make. So if you think about dysfunctional movement patterns, um, if it's a dysfunctional movement pattern, one that our bodies really weren't designed to take for a long time, and the fascia starts to take on that shape, it's going to cause us problems. So think about a couple of ways in which we shape our bodies for long periods of time that's not what we were designed for, right? If you got a couple in mind, I do as well, right? I'll tell you one is sitting, right? So if we spend a lot of time sitting, the connective tissues on the back line of the body tends to get locked long. On the front line of the body, it tends to get locked short. Causes a number of problems for us. Another one is rounding in the thoracic spine. So if you think about a lot of us in offices or on laptop computers, or most of us spend way too much time craning our necks and our heads forward looking at smartphones, right? over time, the fascia, the connective tissues are going to take those shapes too. It will cause us problems. So yin yoga is one tool that we can use to start to correct some of these dysfunctional movement patterns and its effect on this essential connective tissue. So as I said, fascia has aspects of both plasticity and elasticity, which means it can respond to change if that change is skillful, if we do it with thought and care. Um, Fascia is the primary target of yin yoga. Do we want to have some influence on the muscles? Sure. But there are other modalities that I think stretch muscles really well. I think one of the primary benefits of yin yoga, from my perspective, is its effect on the fascia. The link to traditional Chinese medicine, I said it once earlier, I referenced it, but let me go back to it and say it specifically. This is not a universal belief or understanding, but many teachers with respect to yin yoga, traditional Chinese medicine, and anatomy believe that the medium through which energy flows in the Chinese meridians is literally through the fascia. So we're going to talk about four specific meridians that relate to our practice today based on anxiety. So I talked about some of these qualities, and forgive me, the slide earlier I said it said season um, something else and taste, but it was season, color, and taste. So with heart and small intestine meridians, these are fire element meridians. The season of these elements is summer. The color is red. The taste is bitter. The emotions that you might expect to be associated with fire element meridians are things like conscious witness, spirit, longing, and connection. Now, prenatal virtues, and if you remember, I mentioned I consider these to be sort of aspirational aspects that we want to work toward, include for fire element heart and small intestine meridians things like fostering social harmony, promoting peace, pleasure, joy, feelings of contentment and tranquility, having healthy boundaries. The acquired emotions, which, as I mentioned, we would typically associate with being sort of difficult emotions, are things like nervousness, excitement, shock, specifically anxiety, overexcitement, heartache, and mania. Remember, with anxiety, I mentioned that the energy level with anxiety, it's really high energy. Look at those acquired emotions, and they all have a really high energy level, which makes sense for fire element, right? Now, let's look at earth. The earth element meridians are stomach and spleen. So the season is late summer, right? So it's tied to fire in that way. The seasonality is close. The color is yellow. The taste is sweet. Now, I think of earth element as having a lot to do with cognitive functions. So the emotions involved in things like intellect and our ability for analysis and thinking, pensiveness, worry, depression, and shame. So the prenatal virtues are very aspirational ways of thinking. So things like faith, honesty, having openness, being accepting, being truthful. Whereas the acquired emotions also have to do with cognitive function, but really difficult cognitive function. Worry, remorse, regret, self-doubt, obsession, and self-centeredness. Um, so hopefully, on a theme in a practice related to anxiety, you can see why I chose these four elements. The heart and small intestine as the high energy, and the stomach and spleen for the thinking come together. And when we have imbalances there, the manifestation for uh, anxiety, everything is all lined up for that. So we're going to start our practice now. So what I would like you to do, pause your recording, set up your practice space. We're going to start standing. We're going to do a few minutes of meridian tapping for heart, small intestine, stomach, and spleen. But I'd also like you to set out your mat, get one or two blankets, your bolster, two yoga blocks, and when you're ready, press play, and we'll begin with our meridian tapping practice, followed by our fire and earth yin practice for anxiety. All right, friends, make your way into your practice space. And our first practice is going to be a meridian tapping. So Feet hip distance apart. With the outside edges of your feet, make the shape of a number 11. Put a little bit of a slight bend in the knees, a little water element. So there's a little effort in the legs here. Stack the joints, float your head over your shoulders, over your hips, knees, and ankles. And then clap the palms of your hands together. Rub them together to warm them, generate some heat. And we're going to start placing the hands on the liver. So the landmark is right hand on the right floating rib, left hand over right. Just hold pressure here. Feel for that sense of warmth from your hands permeating into your liver. And then take both hands to your lower back kidney. And then release your hands here. Place your right hand on the bony jutty vertebrae in the back of your neck. That's C7. And then left hand over your right. Just hold pressure here. We're going to work through that same sequence 2 more times. All right, so clap your hands together. Rub the palms of your hands together. This will be a little quicker round through this time. Liver. Kidneys. C7 vertebrae. Clap your hands together, rub the palms together. Liver. Kidney. C7. And then we're going to follow this with a single round of clearing. And we'll do that in between each iteration, each of the different exercises. Now release your hands down in front of your thighs. Let them float about an inch in front of your thighs. And then circle your hands up to shoulder height. For this first one, we'll clear 3 times. And then visualize like you were pressing a ball down to the bottom of a swimming pool. Circle your hands up to shoulder height. Press the ball down into the swimming pool. And then one more time. From this point forward, we're only going to do it a couple more times, but when I call for this, I'll just ask you to work through a clearing. Right, so this next thing is going to start in a really similar looking way. Clap the palms together, rub the palms together, place both hands back on the liver, but this time we're going to rotate up to the sternum, down over the stomach, to the lower dantian, just below the belly button. 3 times, up to the liver. This is in the direction of digestion. Over to the stomach, lower dantian. And one more pass through, and then we're going to pause at that lower dantian, which is your center. You soften your eyes a little bit, and then work through a single round of clearing. All right, and next we're going to do meridian tapping for the stomach meridian. So stomach and spleen, I think about the front plane of the body. So we'll start, it'll be the tips of the fingers, starting under the eye, coming down the face, neck, just inside the nipple line, down the front plane of the body. Once you get below the waist, we'll go from fingertips to palms of the hand. So start tapping onto the eyelids right in the center. Work down your cheekbones, your jawline, the front of your neck, collarbones, just inside the nipple line, and then flats of your hands. Start bending at the waist. You can get all the way down to the tops of your feet. Come back up the tops of your feet, back to fingertips. We're going to do this once we reach the eyelids again. We're going to go down and back up one more time. This meridian tapping is a practice promotes awareness of the meridians, but it's also supposed to help remove stuck energy and promote a healthful flow of energy. All right, good job, friends. Once you've reached the eyelids again, float your hands down in front of your thighs, single round of clearing. All right, heart meridian next. So take the fingers of your right hand, place them in your left armpit. That right thumb, find a little area, a little tender spot of flesh here, just a gentle pinching. Make about 5 circles forward. They don't have to be fast. I'd like them to be thoughtful and deliberate. And then after 5 forward, make 5 backward. All right, good job. Now, release there. Fingers of your left hand in your right armpit. With that thumb, massage on the pectoral muscle. Find that tender point. When you find it, you'll know for sure. And then 5 circles forward. Again, they do not need to be fast. They just need to be thoughtful and deliberate. And then after 5 forward, 5 and reverse. And then float your hands in front of your thighs, work through a single round of clearing. And with our meridian tapping practice, we're going to close with small intestine meridian. So put a little deeper bend in your knees. Relax your arms wholly, so totally de-energized. Start rotating your body, your torso at the trunk. And let your arms go rubbery. And keep rotating until the backs of your hands come up and they're gently tapping the backs of your shoulders. Not aggressively, just gentle taps. So in Qigong, this is called swings. It's also a small intestine meridian tapping. My yin teacher, Annie Yao, says, this is silly. This is silly, but it really stood out to me. Once you've reached the peak and the hands are gently tapping the backs of the shoulders, it's as if you're telling yourself, good job, good job, good job. All right, start to slow the pace, tempo. Those rubbery arms get closer and closer. Find an apparent pause. 3 rounds of clearing again. Circle your hands up to shoulder height. Press the ball down into the water. Apparent pause first, second clearing. And that third and final round of clearing. And friends, that's our meridian tapping practice. So pause your recording, set up your space, and when you come back, we'll get started with our yin practice and our anxiety dharma talk. All right, friends, we're going to get started with your practice. So once again, I recommend a yoga mat. At least I like to have one blanket laid down over my practice space, just a little bit more padding between my body and the earth. But you're going to need another blanket at some point. So at least one blanket. You can get by with one. I prefer you have 2. Yoga bolster would be a nice resource, and 2 yoga blocks. So make your way into a comfortable seated position. Once again, stack your joints. Put your head over your shoulders, over your hips. And we're going to start by a little bit of chanting. We'll make 3 Om sounds. So first, a cleansing breath. We're on a deep, life-affirming inhale. Exhale, open your mouth, sigh that breath out. And for the next 3 breaths, I'll cue for an inhale. You can choose to join me for an Om, or you can choose not to Om. Inhale. When you chant Om, imagine that you are everywhere. Inhale. Shift your attention to the space between your eyebrows. Inhale. Come back to a natural breath. So we're going to start with some pranayama. We're going to start with a breath practice. At some point during the practice, I'm going to talk about the autonomic nervous system and in particular the vagus nerve. So this is a practice that when I talk about things that are vagal toning. This is one example. Right? This is a 4/8 relaxation breath. So it'll be a 4-count inhale through your nose, followed by an 8-count exhale through your mouth, making a ha sound. You can make a very audible ha sound, or it could be silent and it could just be the sensation of that ha. I have no preference. But exhale out all your air, and then inhale through your nose for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale through your mouth, ha. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale nose, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale mouth, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Two more. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breath is natural, eyes are closed, body is relaxed. That was a 4/8 relaxation breath. It is vagal toning, and I'll talk later in the practice more about what that means. All right, friends, the first true yin shape of our practice today is going to be a constructive rest position. So during these transitions, really focus on using good body mechanics. Come down onto your back. Place the soles of your feet on the earth with a generous bend in your knees, but take your feet out wide, maybe full mat width apart, and then allow gravity to draw your knees into center to rest on one another. Now, depending on the state of your hips, it may not feel great for your hips. You could place a blanket or a block in between your knees. And then you could tee your arms out to the side. You could reach your arms up overhead. You could place both hands down somewhere in your torso. Maybe hands, palms facing down on the bottom of your rib cage. So this constructive rest position with the feet out wide and knees drawing in toward one another, it relaxes the psoas, which is a deep hip flexor, ties the upper and lower part of the skeletal system together. It's foundationally important to human movement. But energetically, in traditional Chinese medicine, it has specific associations with the secondary channel of kidney meridian, which is water element. That's not the focus of our practice or this workshop, but the acquired emotion that's most frequently associated with water element, especially kidney, is fear. Right? So you can probably see some relationship between fear and anxiety. And if for no other reason, we want to relax, cause a mechanical relaxation of the psoas, such as what we're doing right here. Because if you can imagine these deep hip flexors, when they're overengaged and tight, can cause lower back pain, can cause hip pain, can cause knee pain. So lots of good reasons to do this pose. So during this practice today, I'm going to be sharing a number of what I think of as anxiety hacks. Right? And the first one that I'll talk about is meditation. For the chronically anxious, if you're, I'm in that tribe, if you're in that tribe too, meditation for us is really not optional, right? It's a must do. But there are so many obstacles and barriers to meditation. And I don't know what you've heard or what your experience is with meditation. You may have a very seasoned practice, or you may never have meditated in your life. The biggest barrier that I hear from people is a sense that I don't know how to do it, or I may be doing it wrong. Right? This is darn near universal. Every experienced meditator that I've ever met and who was transparent and shared their experience shared that they went through a season of their practice where they really were racked with doubt about whether they were doing it right. Right? So one of the benefits of a meditation practice, particularly a mindfulness meditation practice, is it can pull us out of that future-oriented anxiety or that past-oriented depression and help orient our attention to the here and now, the present moment experience. So this is not going to be a meditation how-to, and I'm also a certified meditation mindfulness teacher. So I do have tools and resources that I can help with that. But the bottom line is um, mindfulness meditation is about applying a specific technique that's an anchor to the present moment experience. So think about what are the constant anchors. Maybe notice where your body's coming into contact with the earth. Unless you've jumped up in the air for that split second you're in the air, you won't have it. But the rest of the time, you've got some kind of contact with the earth. Or maybe it's your breath, something to do with your breath. But it could be anything. Applying a mantra can be helpful. And it might be something as simple as each time you inhale, gently, silently saying to yourself, breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. And each time you exhale, silently saying to yourself, breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. Or sometimes a practice of counting. Each round of breath that's not interrupted by us chasing our thoughts, we count. Each time we catch ourselves lost in thought or starting to chase a thought, we notice that with curiosity and kindness, and then we start the count over again at 0. I've been meditating pretty consistently for about 14 years. I rarely make it past a 3. And it's often still a really good meditation. One of the things that I've noticed is I'm sometimes pretty judgmental about myself, about my perceived quality of the meditation that I did. What was that experience like? Not sure that I did well today, right? But I will tell you, the days that I do a so-called low-quality meditation practice versus not meditating at all, I'm able to bring a better version of myself to the world, and I feel better, right? So the meditation works whether we think we're doing great at it or not. All right, friends, this pose was a little, for most bodies, was a little bit more gentle, right? As we move on, remember, I talked about this during the presentation part of the talk, but I want you to feel something in these shapes. I want you to feel a level of discomfort, but just shy of pain. So on a numeric scale from 0 to 10, start at a level of sensation that's at least a 4, but not more than a 6. All right, and with that, friends, we're going to start the transition. So tabletop first. Use good body mechanics. So maybe walk your knees over your ankles, roll off onto either side, press yourself up into your tabletop, and it might be useful to have 2 blocks and a bolster close by. Now, from this tabletop, float your shoulders over your wrists, float your hips over your knees, and then walk your hands about 3 handprints forward. Turn the hands out wide, turn the fingers out wide. Leave the hips floating over the knees, lower your heart down to the earth. And you can, if you're getting like a pinching sensation in the tops of the shoulders, I'm not qualified to diagnose, friends, but in my body, that's impingement, right? We don't want to bear that kind of discomfort. So place a bolster under your heart, lift yourself up a little bit higher. So this sensation of discomfort shy of pain, various yin teachers over the years have described this as a dull achiness or a bitterness or a diffuse pressure. But for my money, this numerical scale is the best tool for this. So what we're looking to do here is open up the energetic channels along the front plane of the body, stomach and spleen meridian. So we want a sense of openness between the groin and the throat. And you may also feel a gentle compression at the low back, that's urinary bladder meridian, in the tops of the shoulders, where we actually get into heart and small intestine meridian. Right, so I talked in the last shape about meditation. I'm going to close the loop on meditation with a few more thoughts. So one is the foundation of my meditation practice. There is no question, is mindfulness. And mindfulness is not always great for me when I'm deep in the throes of anxiety. Because we're in our present moment experience, sometimes mindfulness, when I'm in a very, very anxious state, puts me more in touch with my anxiety in a way that's not helpful. So it's nice to have some other tools, some other practices in your toolkit, such as metta, loving kindness, or tonglen, or bija, a guided chakra meditation. Anything else that gives you a nice focal point other than your anxiety. All right, friends, check in with your body. Notice your current level of sensation. You don't have to change a thing. But if you've opened up some space in your body once more, I'm going to demo this. I'm not going to stay with it. It won't feel good in my body. You can place blocks under your hands, which will give your hands another 3 inches of lift for your heart and your head to fall down toward the earth. So I think mindfulness is foundationally is a great practice for people with anxiety. And like for most of the time, I think mindfulness should be the choice, the go-to. That's what seems to work best for me. And having some other practices at your fingertips for the times where that's not good for you makes sense. All right, friends, we're going to start to transition out of this. Rather than muscling out, the most gentle way I found to come out of this, rock the crown of your head forward toward the top edge of your mat till your hips start to lower down toward the earth, and then bring your hands under your shoulders, press yourself up onto your knees, grab your blanket. Take your blanket, so you've got a blanket that's folded in half, and then folded into a quarter and an eighth. And this is a good starter width for snake and rat, which is our next pose. It's a yoga belly roll. So I'm going to go the more narrow the initial fold, the more sensation that you'll get. I'm going to go a little bit narrower. Start from one end and roll from one end to the other. Just to keep things straight, I go from the smooth edge to the phrase. That's not the right way to do it. It's just one way. Now, if you have a wider, like an eighth of a fold before you started to roll, then have the sides of this little cylinder that you shape open up towards your hip points, right? But otherwise, if it's more narrow like mine, then you can have the top and bottom of that cylinder opening in the direction of your face and your toes. Now start out in a forearm plank, right? You can even tuck the toes, forearms on the earth. Now, if you're getting any pressure in your rib cage, your belly roll is too high. You want it to be right about in the center of your belly button, right? And then as you get comfortable, you can let the legs fold out, and then you can act like you're skydiving and let your whole body fold down to the earth. Now, I prefer your head be on the earth. I'm going to rest my temple on a block so that the mat doesn't interfere with my microphone. I can continue to talk with you. So another tool for the chronically anxious is walking, right? It's frequently diagnosed by medical personnel, but anxious folk often share this as a practice that's really, really helpful. So it could be fitness walking, and it doesn't have to. It can be just a meandering type, almost like a purposeless walk. I read a quote years ago that for an unhappy but otherwise healthy person, a 5 mile walk does more good than all the medication and talk therapy in the world. Right? I believe this is also true for us as anxious folks. So, what does it look like to have that walk planned as a part of your day? Or when you notice if you're applying mindfulness in your life, and as we get better and more skillful at noticing that we're at the beginning end of going into an anxious spiral, what if we were to interrupt that spiral with a nice meandering walk for 30 minutes or an hour? Or if you have 10 minutes, maybe it's a 10-minute walk. The nice thing about the walk is it doesn't limit our options for any other options. We can do anything that we would have done otherwise, we can do. So I've only had short periods of my life where I was on medication for anxiety. But one of the books that I've read 5 or 6 times, but I read again recently in preparing for this workshop, it's Sarah Wilson's First We Make the Beast Beautiful. And she talks about experimenting with substituting walks for her anxiety medication and finding that the walks had as as positive outcome on her anxious spiral and bout, or more so than the walk itself, than the medication itself. So I am the prize of what we're doing here. So this belly roll, the snake and rat pose as a yoga belly roll, is using the mechanical force of that blanket to exert pressure into our soft tissues in the abdomen. Right? So it does compress and both compress and lengthen connective tissues and stomachs and spleen meridian in the front plane of the body. But this is also a mechanical release of the psoas, similar to that constructive rest pose that we did. This is a far, far more aggressive way of approaching that. All right, friends, we're going to start to transition out of this. Come back to your forearm plank first. Remove the belly roll. And then find any resting shape on your belly. So today for me, that's going to be half frog. So I'll go pulse my arms out to the side, elbows in line with my shoulders, fingertips pointing up past the top edge of my mat. I'm going to shift my gaze to the left and lift my left knee in the general direction of my left elbow. That left knee, it doesn't have to touch the elbow. It doesn't even have to be close, just in the general direction. And then from here, surrender to gravity. All right, friends. Lower that left knee back down in line with the right. And then walk the weight of your body onto your forearms. Float your shoulders over your elbows. We're going to find Sphinx pose. Place a block at the highest height in between your wrists. And you can lengthen your legs behind you as you might in vinyasa, maybe even engage the legs, but then go soft and let everything from your lower back down to the tips of your toes go soft. So heels may drop to one end to the other. Now, if you are compelled to pull yourself forward, which I would cue you to do in vinyasa, it's not desirable here. We have different goals. You can flip your palms up toward the stars. And anything that's not seeking to keep your shoulders floating over your elbows, let go and release it. Soften your belly.
All right, friends, check in with your body. Notice your current level of sensation. And if you're in that range from 4 to 6, you may be home. You don't have to change anything. But if you've opened up some space and your body wants more, one way you can do that, turn your palms down to face the earth, walk the fingers out wide, start pressing into the heels of your hands until your elbows lift. And then from there, the closer you walk the heels of your hands in towards your waist, the more sensation you get. Now, if you chose to make this transition from Sphinx into Seal, notice what you gave up along the way. What was the sacrifice? Did you start gripping in your glutes? And if so, can you release there? Are you tensing and gripping in your shoulders or your belly? Can you release there? So the next anxiety hack that I want to offer, on the surface, it may not sound like very good advice, right? And this is something that I found in trying to self-manage my anxiety. And I read this in Sarah Wilson's book afterwards, years later, that gave me like an affirmation that it wasn't completely crazy. But what I call this is tracking down the worst case scenario. So in this future-oriented thinking, in the grips of anxiety, um, if you can't seem to break the cycle, if you miss the opportunity to break the cycle when it's early and it's going dark and it's going deep, sometimes I go in the other direction. Instead of trying to pull myself out directly, I push myself in deeper. And I chase down that line of thinking to the worst case, the absolute worst case scenario. So why does that sound crazy? Why does that sound crazy? But it is effective because the worst case scenario for me is generally not death, right? In that worst case scenario, in my anxious state, I'm often homeless. I'm alone with no one to love me. And I don't have a lot of resources, but I'm alive. And it's not that I don't have confidence, it's that I'm anxious. So I'm very confident in my ability from that state, homeless, alone without a lot of resources, to show my resourcefulness and work my way back into the land of the living. Right? I also apply some logic, and when I get through that whole exercise, remind myself that this is worst case scenario thinking. It's very, very unlikely that anything like that would happen. All right, start to lower back down onto the forearms and slide the block out of the way. Come down onto your heart. We're going to go with the broken wing. So tee your right arm out to the side. Walk the fingers of your right hand as far to the right as you can. Bring your left hand under your left shoulder, and then start pressing into your left hand, lifting the whole left plane of your body, floating it over your right. And as I just did here, you might even choose to put a bend in your left knee and step your left foot behind your right knee. It might be useful to have a block close by too. Right? If your body wants more sensation here, you could walk the fingers of your right hand further to the right. You could also place a block at any height under that left hand. So I used to cue this to take the back of your left hand to your lower back here. And you can do that, it's not wrong. But I find if my goal is to get more sensation in the front of that right shoulder, it's really much more effective for me to place a block under that left hand than to take the half bind behind my lower back. Friends, you maintain the same orientation when we go the other side. I'm going to transition and just change my orientation just for demonstration purposes. All right, friends, start to lower your heart back down onto the mat. Ooh, maybe shake out that right arm. And then we're going to change sides. Walk the fingers of your left hand over to your left. Bring your right hand under your right shoulder. Start pressing into your right hand. Float the whole right side of your body over your left. Maybe put a bend in that right knee. Step your right foot behind your left knee. So another anxiety hack that's a pretty universal, and this is one that you've probably done before, is to try to find a purpose for your pain. And it's said that if we have a purpose for our pain, then our pain becomes much easier to live with. So sometimes we do this career-wise, right? So people takes a job, a promotion at a job that's pretty anxiety provoking. It's much more responsibility or pressure than they would ordinarily want. Right? But knowing that we're doing this for our spouse or our partner or our children can make this much more purposeful. So the extreme example, right? Nothing in my life compares to this, and nor do I need to justify my anxiety or my experience to anyone. But Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, was in a Jewish elimination camp during World War II. His whole family, everyone he knew, was killed. And the purpose that he gave to his pain was to stay with that experience to write a memoir that maybe would help other people who are suffering. So just like the other side, if you want more sensation, walk the fingers of your left hand further to the left, maybe place a block under your right hand. And he found in such a difficult situation, I can't imagine a more difficult situation, he was able to maintain his dignity and really increase his personal power. It's said that he even had Nazi guards coming to him asking him for life advice. Right? They recognized his power and his wisdom. And that's the power of finding a purpose for your pain. All right, friends, if there's a block under that right hand, remove the block, roll back down onto your belly. Ooh. And then from here, press yourself back up onto your knees. And we're going to work into dragon pose. So come back to a tabletop. I'd like you to have 2 blocks available. Step your right foot forward to the outside of your right hand. Maybe scoop the inside that right hand on the inside of the right heel. Walk that right heel back behind you. Maybe tuck the toes under your left foot. Walk that left knee long behind you. Now, hands on blocks at the highest height is what I recommend. Now, in vinyasa, I would cue you to engage that left glute. Here, I'm not going to cue you to do that. In fact, I prefer that you not. Softness there. What we're looking for here, what we're hoping to do is open up the energetic channels against stomach and spleen meridian along the front plane of the body. Right, so think about that. You may be feeling opening from the inside of that left knee all the way up into the groin. And I'm going to give you a couple of options in a few minutes to add some sensation on this side. But remember what our goal in this practice here is. It's really today the front plane of the body. So the autonomic nervous system is one branch of the motor nervous system, right? And I don't want to get into too much detail on the nervous system because without a diagram to look at, we can get in over our heads. It can be really confusing. But in the motor nervous system, there's the somatic nervous system, which is like us willing our muscles to move, things like that. And the autonomic nervous system, which is a lot of it's fairly subconscious. And that's broken down into 2 divisions as well. And one is sympathetic nervous system, right? Sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight nervous system. And the other is parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. So under sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight nervous system activation, the blood vessels constrict, right? They get more narrow, which means we get an increase in blood pressure, increase in heart rate, increase in body temperature. Blood is pulled away from the digestive and sexual organs and it's shifted to the brain, the heart, the lungs, the large muscles, what we would need to either flee from a threat or fight it off, right? Which is good, which is good. We need that as a survival mechanism. The hiccup is the autonomic nervous system doesn't really distinguish between I'm being mugged, or for our ancestors, I'm under assault by a saber-toothed tiger, or I just said something stupid to my boss or to my best friend, and I'm worried that she's angry with me. All right, friends, check in with your body. Notice your current level of sensation. If you've opened up some space, this is not the option that I'll recommend, and it's not wrong, but many of you are used to this, so let me show it. You could bring your forearms down to the mat or onto blocks on the inside of that right thigh. Right, that will target urinary bladder meridian on the back line of the body. Or bring your hands up even higher, start to lift your chin up, but allow your hips to continue to sink down toward that right heel. Right, this is my preference here because my goal here is to open up those channels on the front plane of the body. Right, so many of us, especially if we're active, we have anxiety or we're prone to anxiety, we're in sympathetic nervous system much of the time. Right now, we need both sympathetic nervous system activation and parasympathetic nervous system. We need them both every day. There are many functions that we have. Like, so the evolutionary reason that we have these two divisions of the nervous system is well beyond that of our ancestors having to flee from or fight off a saber-toothed tiger. Right? We need these every day. But it can really be challenging in that if we're in sympathetic nervous system activation all the time, one, it doesn't feel good, right? Those things that I described, this kind of difficult qualities, right? Difficult states, right? It's good if we need to flee or it's good if we need to fight off an attacker. It's not great for us to be in all the time. And it's inherently inflammatory. So if you like during the uh, talk at the end of the program on Next Level Human, I'm going to talk about chronic systemic inflammation. Um, if we're in acute or we're in chronic sympathetic nervous system activation, that is inherently inflammatory. That's contributing to that. So we don't want to be there all the time. We want to be there when we need it. All right, friends, check in with your body. And we're going to start to transition to the other side. This is the most gentle way I found to do this. Start to press into your right heel. Ooh, slide your hips back behind you. Come back into tabletop. Might be nice to find some gentle movement with that left hip, maybe making small circles. And then we're going to change sides. So step your left foot forward to the outside of your left hand. Once again, maybe scoop that left hand behind the heel. Walk that foot forward. I recommend blocks at the highest height under your hands. Tuck your toes under your right foot rather. Walk that right knee back behind you. And then soften, let gravity draw both hips down toward that left heel. Right, so the contrast, the foil for sympathetic nervous system activation is parasympathetic nervous system activation, rest and digest. So this is inherently anti-inflammatory, right? It's vasodilating. The blood vessels get bigger. So we get a decrease in heart rate. We get a decrease in blood pressure. The blood returns to the digestive system. Our body starts to produce more saliva and bile, things like that. So one of the hacks for parasympathetic nervous system is called the vagus nerve. This is a tense cranial nerve. So obviously it starts in the brain, but vagus is Latin for wandering. So it's a huge networked nerve that runs through the neck, the ears, the side of the face, down through the body, all the way down into the gut. And it has a role in reducing blood pressure, reducing heart rate, a lot of digestive functions. It also can help manage a lot of the things with our metabolism and things like that. So if something massages the vagus nerve, we call it vagal toning. Right, so there are manual massages that we can do for vagal toning, and I could show you one at some point if you're interested. But the more impactful thing that we can do is to use our breath. So long, deep breaths, particularly if the exhale is longer than the exhale is longer than the inhale. These are vagal toning practices. So that 4-8 relaxation breath that we did to start this practice out today, it's not technically complex. If you want to do that breath again, you'll never need me to cue it for you again. You could do it on your own right now. 4 count inhale through your nose, 8 count exhale through your mouth, making a ha sound. Rinse and repeat. That's it. Super impactful on the autonomic nervous system because it tones the vagus nerve. So knowing that, that's a tool that you can use and you can apply in your life. All right, friends, check in with your body. Notice your current level of sensation. Same options you had on the other side. If you wanted to, if you're inclined to come down onto hands or forearms, either on the mat or on blocks, you can do that. Or bring your hands up higher, lift your chin higher, opening up stomach and spleen meridian points. One of the things that I've learned and changed in my personal practice over the last year, that's really made a big difference for me, is the recognition of how I could use the breath to manage my nervous system. So I talked about that 4-8 breath being a parasympathetic nervous system activating breath. Are there not circumstances where we want to activate the sympathetic nervous system? I would argue if there's a circumstance for which you're reaching for a cup of coffee or a sugary snack, you're managing your autonomic nervous system. You're just doing it chemically, right? So there are breath practices that we can use for that that don't have all the same side effects. But the one that I use most of the time, and I think that would be more impactful when talking to a community of people who are learning to work with and live with their anxiety, is that down regulating breath, that vagal toning breath. All right, friends, we're going to come out of this, start pressing into your left heel, slide your hips back behind you. Maybe small circles with that right hip. And then take any resting shape here. So I did half frog on one side and the other side. So I'm going to go post my arms out to the side again, shift my gaze over to the right, lift my right knee up in the general direction of my right elbow. Lower your right knee back down the line with your left. Bring your hands under your shoulders. I'm going to set up into frog pose. So I'm going to show this from two directions. So I'll start facing you. I'd like you to have a bolster. Starting in a tabletop shape. Walk your knees out wider. And from head to toe, if you take a look, if you drew a straight line between my knees and my ankles, that's what I want. So turn your toes to the outside, walk your knees out wider. Now, the goal here is that hips will stay floating over your knees, and then lower your heart and your head down onto your bolster. Let me show you this to show this to you from the other side. And I want to show you what can happen here. So knees and ankles widen out together. So the human tendency is the hips want to come forward toward the earth because it's easier, right? So from a side to side plane, I'd like your hips and knees to be in one line. Here's another thing that sometimes happens. I see this a lot in vinyasa. We do this as a forearm plank, right? It depends on what you want. If you want our six pack abs, it's not a bad strategy. But I don't care about six pack abs for me or for you because I know it's not a good indicator of health. And what we want today is not to firm the front plane of the body, but to soften and open up the stomach and spleen meridian points. So, although this is your practice and you get to choose, my preference would be that you just lower your heart and your head down to your bolster. Sometimes, when what we feel is anxiety, we can transform our anxiety into excitement. Right now, I want to be careful because this sounds like some kind of a gaslighting that we can do to ourselves. And me telling you that could sound like a gaslighting that I'm trying to do to you. So I'm going to tell you, I don't think this hack or this tool is appropriate for every anxiety situation. But for certain situations, it's useful. So one example is public speaking is really scary for people. Even very experienced public speakers, in the right circumstance, can experience a ton of anxiety over what they are about to do. Right? If that's the case, it's useful from an emotional management standpoint and a perception standpoint to choose to transfer that anxiety into excitement. Anxiety in a public speaker often comes across as enthusiasm and excitement. So, what are some other circumstances where you might be able to do that? With some restraint, with some emotional control, it might also work well in a job interview, which is, again, often a pretty anxiety provoking circumstance. Check in with your body, friends. Notice your current level of sensation. I'm at a 7 right now. I don't want any more. But if you did take your knees and ankles out wider, or you could lower your head or your heart closer down to the earth. But note, I would still like you to leave your hips floating over your hips and your knees in one line from side to side. Again, I'm good. So if you're in that 4 to 6 range, there's no reason to change anything, friends. You're probably home. Right? So again, that tool of transforming anxiety into excitement, not appropriate at all for every anxious state. And in some circumstances, I could imagine it making things worse. But in the right circumstances, in the right set of circumstances, is really helpful. Notice if you're gripping. Notice if you're holding on to any muscular engagement that you don't need to maintain this shape. And if you find that you are, it's okay. Notice it with curiosity and kindness for sure. But can you choose to let that go? All right, friends, we're going to start to shift out of this. Now, once again, I prefer you not muscle your way out of it. The most gentle way I found, slide the crown of your head forward until your hips come down to the earth. Walk your legs back together. And then however you want to get there, where I'd like you to go next is on your back. And we're going to do a supine twist called twisted root. Some good body mechanics in these transitions. Put a bend in your knees with the soles of your feet on the earth. Tee your arms out to the side. Walk your hips over to the right. And then drop your knees over to the left. And for now, you're home. I'll give you some tools in a couple moments if you wanted to add some sensation, you could. So one tool that I think is pretty important is to be really cautious and intentional in not um, allowing ourselves to become anxious over our anxiety, right? So what does that mean? We've got the anxiety itself, and then we start to go into this overthinking line of questions about what this means about me as a human being that I'm anxious in this moment. It's not helpful. It's not helpful. It happens with sleep sometimes. With insomnia, we have difficulty sleeping, and then we start calculating the amount of sleep that or lack of sleep that we're going to go into the next day with, which makes it harder for us to sleep. It's a positive feedback loop in the worst way. I'll tell you more about that in a moment when I offer you some tools to go deeper into the shape. For this twist, if you wanted to add sensation, I can think of two tools. One will add a little sensation. That is, shift your gaze out over the fingers of your right hand. Or if you want to add significant sensation, a lot of sensation, straighten your right leg. Let gravity draw that big toe edge blade of your right foot down to the earth. And you could, I can't. Um, I'm going to put the bend back on my knee, but it's possible to do both of these too. And I would say not unusual. I don't have a whole bunch of torso mobility friends, but you may. Either way is okay. So in the Buddhist spiritual tradition, there's a teaching called the teaching of the second arrow, right? In this business of feeling anxious over our anxiety is a great example of it. So in this teaching, this is often credited to the Buddha, but historically, I don't know if it was legitimately Siddhartha Gautama's teaching or the historical Buddha or somebody who came later along in the spiritual tradition, and I do not care. Whoever taught that teaching is my Buddha. But the teaching is that, like all these slights and insults and injuries of the world, that's the first arrow. And most of the time, like there's nothing we can do about that. That's going to happen. You know, the first noble truth of Buddhism is there is suffering in human life. There's going to be some of that that comes our way, right? But the second arrow is when we pull the first arrow out and then we repeatedly jab ourselves over and over and over again, multiplying the bleeding um, over and over again. And that second arrow is that's voluntary. That we don't have to do. All right, friends, start to lift your knees back up to center. Shift your gaze back to neutral. Walk your hips over to the left. Drop your knees over to the right. And then maybe shift your gaze out over the fingers of your left hand. Right, so that example of insomnia where we're not sleeping well, and then we perseverate, or we have these repetitive thoughts over the lack of sleep that we're getting, which contributes to us not being able to get back to sleep. That's second arrow. That's preventable. We don't have to do that. When we're feeling anxious, and then we create these stories in our head about what it means about us that we're feeling anxious, which makes us feel more anxious. Second arrow. We don't have to do that. In recovery circles, I learned this in Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's in other parts of recovery circles too. The expression is pain is mandatory, but suffering is optional. It took me years to really understand what that meant. It's second arrow. The pain is the first arrow, the suffering is the second arrow. So where in your anxiety, what in your anxiety is first arrow for you? What is second arrow? We've got one more shape after this one before our final resting shape, and I have two more hacks. So let me start one here. One useful hack is, have you ever given any thought to what are the positive sides of your anxiety? Like what's good? What about your anxiety is helpful for you? If you want more sensation, again, if you haven't done so already, shift your gaze out over your left shoulder or straighten your left leg. Let gravity draw that big toe edge blade of your left foot down toward the earth. Again, that would be way too much for me. It might be fine for you. Meaning what? Right? So, what gets done in your life, in the world, and in the lives of the people in your life because you're anxious? Right? How does your anxiousness manifest in a way that benefits you or other people? Right? And I don't think we should be using this to encourage ourselves to be anxious, but if this is going to happen on some level anyway, finding some value in it can be really useful. 2,000 years ago or longer, 2,500 years ago, Marcus Aurelius wrote, in all things ask yourself this one question: how is this of advantage to me? Or if you're going to have the negative parts of the anxiety, it might be useful and it might be therapeutic for you to think, what are some of the positive parts of that? Because a lot of the time, like not everyone that I know is anxious is wired for anxiety, right? Sometimes people have specific life circumstances that bring it out. But I also believe that, like for me and for many other anxious people, we are wired for that. There's something in our hardwiring that causes that anxiety. Knowing that, how do we make that work for us? So I'd like you to think about that. Give that some thought. What are the benefits to you or other people in your anxiety? All right, friends. If you straighten your left leg, put a bend back in that left knee. Bring your knees back up to center. Leave the bend in your knees. And I'd like you to bring the soles of your feet together. Let gravity draw your knees down toward the earth. If there's not a provocative reason for you to not have blocks under your knees or your thighs, I'd like you to put them there. Again, it's your practice. You can do what you like. A provocative reason might be I don't get the sensation that I need with blocks under my knees or thighs. And then anything you like with your hands. One hand on your belly, one hand on your heart. Might be nice to orient you to your breath. If you're feeling anxious and you need a reprieve, maybe place both hands on your heart. You could also have your arms overhead or out, teed out to the side, wherever you're comfortable. And the last anxiety hack that I'll close with is minimizing options. Right? You can probably think of a circumstance where everything felt okay and then you were presented with too many choices and it really spiked your anxiety, right? Choices, as nice as it is to have choices, choices sometimes can very much be anxiety provoking. So what can we do to minimize our choices? It's said that President Obama, he had multiple suits, of course. He was the president of the United States for 8 years, but all his suits were one of two different styles. Like it was, and the styles were the same colors. So let's say, I don't know exactly. Let's say he had black suits and he had gray suits. And that was what he had, right? Because as the president of the United States, he had these important decisions to make related to national security. as commander in chief and as chief of state, right? He didn't need to bog down his bandwidth by making decisions about the silly things like what am I going to wear to work today? Minimize your choices. And one of my other rules, I'm a yoga health coach, right? And one of the things that I talk to people about and having healthy habits is finding ways using the best available social science to automate the habits so they don't have to make a decision. Because we reach something called decision fatigue, right? And you've experienced this. So those days where you're trying to be careful about what you eat, maybe you're trying to lose weight, maybe you're just trying to be healthier, and you have a healthy breakfast and you pack healthy foods for work, you eat well all day long, and then you get home and you're exhausted. And all of that goes out the window when you eat 2 bags of potato chips and drink a 6 pack of orange Fanta, right? Not good, not what you needed or wanted. Right? Why does that happen? And maybe it happens over and over again, and you don't know why. Right? Things like that happen to me for years, and I can never understand why. The reason is decision fatigue. Right? We may put ourselves in a position of making so many decisions that day that by the time we go home, we have, it's not about willpower. We just have no more energy reserves for making decisions like that. Whereas if part of the morning preparations when the drive is really high is to make dinner, maybe a hot soup or a batch of chili in a crock pot, you get home when you're hungry and exhausted, you no longer have to make a decision. It's been made, you made it when the version of yourself that was really um, clear on your goals was in charge. Right? If you want more sensation, a couple things you could do. One, reach your arms out over your head. Two, you could place a block, probably at the medium height, probably with the long edge of the block perpendicular to the long edge of your mat in your spine, under your thoracic spine, and then reach your arms out over your head. Allow the crown of your head to fall back toward the earth. Now that doesn't feel great for my neck, so my arms over my head are going to cup the back of my head and provide some gentle support. Right? If you choose this, you might be able to notice the sense of this opening up those energetic channels on the front plane of your body. That might not mean feeling the flow of energy, but you can feel those connective tissues, that fascia on the front plane of your body starting to stretch out. All right, friends, if you've placed a block under your lower back, start to lift yourself up so you can remove the block. And then from here, come into any final resting shape. Friends, this is totally up to you. Like sometimes we're conditioned to think you have to be on your back with your hands down by your waist, palms facing the sky. Not true. As long as you can balance the two qualities of relaxation and alertness, you can take any resting shape on your seat, your belly, your back, or your side. So for me for today, I'm going to take a restorative bridge with 2 blocks under my lower back, both at the lowest setting, but one stacked on top of the other. And I'm going to reach my arms up over my head. And you might be able to see how this would lengthen out the connective tissues on the front plane of the body. If you choose restorative bridge, note, in a vinyasa formatted class, your teacher, rightly so, would cue you to press down into your feet and engage your legs. Please don't worry about that here. Start to swallow 2 or 3 times. This is vagal toning. And then draw in some deeper breaths, letting your belly and your chest go bigger on each inhale. And feel for a sense of more full and complete on each exhale. Begin to start to reanimate your body with other small movements. Maybe the digits, wiggle your fingers or your toes. Maybe something with your neck. Maybe gently draw your chin from shoulder to shoulder. If those small movements are pleasing, start to go bigger at any time. Maybe things like rotating your hands at the wrists, your feet at the ankles. Maybe you take a full body stretch. Or if the soles of your feet are on the earth, you're on your back with a bend in your knees, you can drop your knees off from side to side, windshield wipe your legs. And then eventually make your way onto either side. Find a fetal position. Check in. Notice how you're feeling. In particular, I'd like you to notice what's the quality of your nervous system now post-practice. And then press yourself up into any seated position. And we've got one more vagal toning practice. So this flap of skin over your ears is called the tragus. So start taking your thumbs on the inside of the tragus and gently massage. You can rub up and down. You can make small circles. The ears are great points to access the vagus nerve. And then with the thumbs on the inside of the tragus, take your index fingers and massage and gently pull at the outside edges of the tragus. And maybe with the thumbs on the index fingers on the tragus, take the thumbs on the outside of the ears and start tracing the ears up and down. And then you can release the tragus, start taking the index fingers in all the little conchs and crevices, all the little crevices, cracks, and seams along the conchs of the ears. Eventually coming down to the earlobes, and maybe between the thumb and index finger, giving them gentle little tugs down toward the earth. And from there, take the index fingers behind the ear, slide them down the neck to the collarbones. 2 more passes at least. Take your hands as if you were about to open a set of curtains. Take them to the back of your head and probe around. You'll feel a little bony notch where the spinal column fits into your skull. It's called the occipital bone. So with those fingers just on the edges of that occipital bone, start to gently pull and tug toward down the bony notch just at the base of your earlobe. And then make another pass, starting a little bit lower, ending a little bit lower. I'm going to do that one more time. And then bring your hands into heart center. Thank you, friends, for practicing with me today. Thank you for moving and breathing with me. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. And may you know peace. So we opened up the practice today with 3 ohms. We're going to close with the option of a single communal ohm. Draw in a deep, life-affirming inhale. Exhale, let that all go. Now, cue for an inhale. You can choose to join me for an ohm, or you can choose not to ohm. Inhale. Feel for the residual vibration of that Om. That chanting is also vagal toning. And then draw your thumbs to the space between your eyebrows. Blessings to you and your family. And that concludes our practice for today. How was that practice experience for you, friends? Do you feel a difference? Did you get some tools from this that you'll be able to use to apply in your life? What's the difference that you feel now, either in your body or maybe in your nervous system? One of the challenges that's different when we have a video style workshop like this is there's no opportunity for you to directly ask me questions, um, give me comments and feedback, or offer any observations. And if you have any of those, I would love to have an opportunity to field those for you. So I'm going to give you my contact information in a few moments. When I do that, I would love to hear from you based on your experience. So it doesn't have to be positive feedback, friends. If your experience could have been better, that's the kind of thing that I would like to hear about. But if I've left you with some questions too, I would love to have an opportunity to field those questions for you. I wanted to take just a few moments to tell you about Next Level Human. As I mentioned earlier, Next Level Human is our 12-month Ayurvedic health coaching program. It's a yoga health coaching program. So this is a program that's based on the habits of the ancient yogis, right? So what we're looking for is there are these 10 habits that we're trying to help people to automate. I'll tell you a little bit later about why changing our habits can be so difficult on our own, and why I think it's significantly easier through a program like Next Level Human. But let me tell you first about some of the base services that are included. So once a week, I get together with a group. We have a group coaching call. We talk about a principle of habit evolution. We do a grounding practice together. We talk about the habit of that week, and then we troubleshoot any particular area where the members are anticipating problems with that habit. Now, the habits themselves, they're not particularly complex. They are sort of like layers on an onion. There's a really superficial level where if we automated just that, it would be impactful. We would notice a difference. But there's also for each habit an opportunity to go really, really deep. That's supported by monthly one-on-one coaching calls where each member gets 15 to 20 minutes with me once a month, where they come into it with a really specific question about how to automate a habit or trouble they're having with one of the habits, and we work through that together. Um, Members of Next Level Human get unlimited access to Transformation Nation Yoga. So what I've committed to is to have at least 8 classes a week. Unlimited access to the Transformation Nation Premium Vimeo channel, which right now, as of this recording, is December 2021. There's about 60 to 70 hours of practice that's available there, and that's quickly growing. Now, one of my hopes from this is that the benefits that the members experience start spilling out into their friends and their family groups. Just to help support that, each member gets 2 guest passes per week for yoga, so they can bring their posse along with them. I also do monthly workshops, monthly social events, the members that are included in the membership, and the members get to bring a guest to each of those too. Now, why do I think that these habits are easier to automate here on our own? Well, part of it is we often know what we should be doing to take care of ourselves, but no one's ever talked to us about what's the best available social science for human habit evolution. My teacher, Kate Stillman, has studied this for years. She's distilled this into a teachable system. So we work through the social science between habit evolution, and we use that to inform the way that we try to automate these habits. My hope is after a year, people have these habit evolution tools that they can apply to any habit and pull into their lives. It's also membership in a dynamic group. Like sometimes when we're trying to change habits in our lives, we don't have a lot of support. And in fact, sometimes we have people in our lives who consciously or unconsciously are undermining the habits that we're trying to take on ourselves. This way, we have membership in a dynamic group. We commune together in our weekly calls. We cheer each other on when we're doing well. When one of us falls down, We pick each other up, dust each other off, and then help each other to get on our way as well. But we also have a closed social media group. Right now, that group is on Facebook. Members also have unlimited access to Kate Stillman's Body Thrive curriculum, which, like, just to be honest with you, the production value isn't great with everything in the Body Thrive curriculum, but the content is amazing. So these are some of the things that people are paying for with the Next Level Human. Now, the other thing I should tell you is this is based on a 12-week program, but we repeat the 12-week program 4 times, right? So it's the same content 4 times. Why the same thing? Our experience is that most members, at best, after one pass through this 12-week program, they automate 1 or 2 programs. I keep saying automate, right? If we are relying on willpower and decision making, we will fail. We will fail at this new habit. It will not work. What we're seeking to do is to apply these social sciences and these habit evolution principles so we don't have to make a decision. In the same way that when you get up in the morning, you don't have to make a decision to brush and floss your teeth. That habit has long been automated. We will teach you how to do the same thing with these impactful habits. But we go through these 4 times because after the first pass, most people have only automated 1 or 2 habits. This gives us 3 more opportunities to work on the other habits and to go deeper into the habits that are already automated. Now, what sort of outcomes can people expect from Next Level Human? Well, things like reducing chronic systemic inflammation, which, if you're not familiar with this, Google it, check it out. It is terrifying. All of the boogeyman ways of getting sick in our age, cancer, diabetes, obesity, coronary heart disease, um, Alzheimer's, the common factor with all of these things is chronic systemic inflammation, right? So reducing that means we have less of a chance of getting sick in those terrible ways. Members experience improved quality and quantity of sleep. They start to get into rhythmic eating, which you may know as intermittent fasting. uh, Move toward optimal body composition. So many people past the age of, say, 20 or 25 struggle to get to an optimal body composition, or they get there and they can't maintain it and they end up yo-yoing back and forth. This program helps with this. It helps us to live and move more powerfully, improve quality relationships. Many of us have so much compression in our schedule in our life, there's just too much to do. The program helps to reduce the compression, and it helps us work toward easeful living. What we're looking for, I tell my members all the time, I don't want to suffer my way to wellness, and I don't want my members suffering their way to wellness either. We want to thrive rather than survive. And the whole program is based on getting us into rhythm with nature, back into our circadian rhythm. So again, the date of this recording is late December 2021. We're currently enrolling for January 2022. So give me a call, text me, or email me if this is of interest to you, or if somebody else in your life might benefit from this. If you look at the opposite of these outcomes, if somebody's experiencing those things right now, somebody could really benefit from this program. So as a review, over the last couple hours, what we did is we distinguished yin yoga from other yoga practices. I provided a brief overview of TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. I described the TCM energetic channels through the Chinese meridians. We discussed specific qualities related to the heart, stomach, small intestine, and spleen meridians. We did 2 practices. The first was a meridian tapping, and the second was a 75 yin yoga practice with a Dharma talk on anxiety. And I gave you a brief overview of our 12-month yoga health coaching program, Next Level Human. So if you'd like to reach out and get in touch with me, you can find me on Instagram at either Transformation Nation Yoga or at the Chris Bishop, or on Facebook at Transformation Nation Yoga. You can also email me, Chris at transformationnationyogaandwellness.com, or a US number that you could call me, or I'm an introvert, I prefer text first if I'm honest with you. Give me a text at 281-728-3896. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, if you have any feedback, if I've left you with questions on anxiety in general or how to apply your yin yoga practice to manage and work with your anxiety,
If you have comments, if you've got some anecdotes that you'd like to share, I'd love to talk with you. So reach out to me for any of those reasons, or if you simply want to know more about Next Level Human. Great job, friends. Once again, my name's Chris. I'm from Transformation Nation Yoga and Wellness. Thank you once again for joining us for YINVINCIBLE, Yin Yoga for Anxiety. You're doing great, friends. Just keep going.